Hi, my friends. Today I want to present you a new story. Enjoy watching it.
The chandeliers bathed the grand ballroom in golden light as laughter and music filled the air. Glasses clinked in celebration, the scent of expensive perfume lingering in the air. I stepped inside, my heels clicking against the marble floor. Conversations faltered. Heads turned. The murmurs spread like wildfire as people recognized me, or rather struggled to believe their eyes. At the far end of the hall, my mother, Eleanor Evans, went rigid, her champagne flute trembling in her grasp. Beside her, Alice, her perfect daughter, stood frozen, the color draining from her face despite the layers of expertly applied makeup. But it was Dylan, the groom, whose reaction I had been anticipating most. His fingers clenched around his glass, his knuckles turning white. The blood drained from his face, not shock, fear. I smiled. Congratulations, Alice. Her bouquet shook slightly in her hands. What are you doing here? Before I could answer, my mother stepped forward, her voice sharp but low enough to avoid drawing attention. Leave. Now. I tilted my head, feigning innocence. Why would I do that? My dear sister is getting married. Surely you wouldn't turn away family on such an important day? Eleanor's lips trembled. You're not family, not after. After you threw me out at 17, I interrupted smoothly. Ah yes, such fond memories. I plucked a champagne glass from a passing waiter, swirling the golden liquid lazily. But time changes things, doesn't it? Dylan still hadn't moved. His silence was almost amusing. Hello, Dylan, I said softly. He stiffened. Alice's frown deepened as she glanced between us. Wait, you two know each other. I let my smile widen. Oh, sweetheart, we don't just know each other. Dylan swallowed hard. Alice's confusion deepened, but my mother was already seething. Whatever game you're playing, end it now, she snapped. I took a slow sip of champagne, letting the tension build. Oh, but I've only just arrived. Around us, the murmurs grew louder. Some guests had abandoned their conversations entirely, drawn in by the unfolding spectacle. From the corner of my eye, I saw Aunt Margaret approaching hesitantly. She had been the only one to hesitate that night, the only one who almost spoke up for me. Camilla, she murmured. I nodded in acknowledgement. Aunt Margaret, it's been a long time. Alice finally found her voice again. You're ruining my wedding. I chuckled. Oh, darling, I haven't even started. Dylan's hands trembled. The man who had betrayed me so cruelly all those years ago was now standing before me, marrying the very sister who had condemned me to the streets. Poetic. I lifted my glass in a slow, deliberate toast to love, trust, and secrets that refused to stay buried. Dylan's face turned a shade paler. Alice's expression darkened. I had returned, and I wasn't leaving until the truth shattered everything. The moment Alice grabbed Dylan's wrist and dragged him toward the hallway, I knew the cracks had begun to show. I followed at a leisurely pace, watching as she pulled him into a secluded corridor, her grip visibly tightening. Explain, she hissed the moment they were alone. How do you know her? Dylan's gaze flickered to me over Alice's shoulder, his expression unreadable. He turned back to her, throat bobbing. She's no one. A soft laugh escaped me, making Alice tense. Oh, Dylan, I murmured, taking a step closer. Lying so easily even now. Alice's eyes darted between us. Dylan? He exhaled sharply, forcing a strained calm. Years ago, I knew Camilla. Briefly, before she left. I raised a brow. You mean before you left me? Alice's mouth parted slightly. Confusion clouded her face. Dylan shot me a silent warning, but I wasn't done. It's funny, isn't it? I mused. How small the world is. One moment, you're engaged to a man who promises you forever. The next, he's standing at the altar with your sister. Alice's breath hitched. Engaged? Dylan stiffened, his hands curling into fists. Camilla, don't. I smiled coldly. Why not? You lied to her, just like you lied to me. Alice turned to Dylan, disbelief flashing in her eyes. Tell me she's lying. Dylan said nothing. I took a step back, savoring the moment. The truth had been set in motion. And soon, the past Dylan had buried so carefully would rip everything apart. I returned to the grand ballroom, my heels clicking against the polished marble floor. The chatter of guests, the clinking of champagne glasses, the golden glow of chandeliers. It all felt like the perfect stage for the grand act I had orchestrated. I slid into my seat at the table near the dance floor, catching Dylan's wary glance across the room. His arm was wrapped protectively around Alice's waist, but his grip looked almost desperate. The toasts began. One after another, guests took turns praising the perfect couple. I waited patiently, sipping my wine, my lips curling into a small smile as the moment drew closer. Finally, Alice's father raised his glass. "To my beautiful daughter and her incredible husband-to-be," he said, beaming. "May their future be filled with love, honesty, and success." I chuckled softly. Honesty? Oh, the irony. I stood. "If I may," I said, lifting my glass. The room hushed. Alice's eyes narrowed while Dylan stiffened beside her. I smiled sweetly. "Dylan, I was just reminiscing about old times. Tell me, do you still enjoy those little backroom deals?" A ripple of confusion passed through the crowd. Dylan's fingers tightened around his champagne flute. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said quickly. I sighed, reaching into my clutch. "Then let's refresh your memory." I tapped my phone, and suddenly, a voice echoed through the speakers. Dylan's voice. "They'll never trace it back to me. The numbers are buried. No one will ever know." A gasp ran through the guests. The color drained from Dylan's face. Alice turned to him sharply. "What is she talking about?" "Nothing." Dylan snapped, but his voice wavered. I tilted my head. "Oh, Dylan, you always were such a smooth liar. But the thing about secrets, they don't stay buried forever." The silence in the ballroom was deafening. The trap had been set, and Dylan had walked right into it. The ballroom buzzed with whispers. Alice's gaze darted between Dylan and me, her carefully crafted world wobbling under the weight of suspicion. Dylan's face was pale, his lips pressed into a thin, unconvincing line of denial. But I wasn't finished, not yet. With a slow, deliberate movement, I turned toward Alice. "Oh, but dear sister, let's not pretend you're innocent in all this." Alice scoffed, flipping her hair over her shoulder. "What nonsense are you spewing now?" I reached into my clutch once more, pulling out a neatly folded document. I held it up for all to see. "This, my dear Alice, is proof that you never graduated medical school." Gasps rippled through the crowd. A few guests, including those who had trusted Alice as their doctor, took a visible step back. Alice's confident smirk faltered. "That's a lie." I didn't let her finish. "You forged your degree. Your patients were trusting a fraud." I let the words sink in, watching Alice's composure crack like fragile glass. The murmurs turned into accusations. "I had surgery under her care," someone whispered in horror. "Is this true?" Dylan demanded, his voice shaking with anger. Alice's eyes darted around wildly, searching for an escape. "This is ridiculous. Mom, Dad, say something." I turned to our parents, standing frozen, their faces drained of color. "You did, didn't you?" My voice was calm, but the accusation in my tone was razor sharp. "You helped her lie, just like you helped Dylan cover his crimes." My father stammered, "Camilla, this isn't the place." "Oh, I think it's the perfect place," I cut him off. "You threw me out for being worthless, but look who the real frauds are." The tension in the room was suffocating. The family's dirty secrets lay exposed for all to see, and there was no hiding now. The reckoning had begun. The ballroom doors burst open, and the hum of conversation died instantly. Gasps rippled through the crowd as uniformed officers strode inside, their expressions stern. A hush fell over the guests. Alice went rigid, her manicured fingers digging into Dylan's sleeve. Our mother let out a sharp gasp, her face draining of color. I stepped forward, my heart steady. "Right on time," I murmured, watching as confusion turned to horror on my family's faces. One of the officers held up an arrest warrant. "Dylan Carter, you are under arrest for embezzlement, fraud, and conspiracy." Dylan's champagne flute slipped from his fingers, shattering against the floor. "What?" His voice cracked as he turned to Alice. This isn't real." "Alice, tell them." Alice couldn't respond. She was already backing away as another officer approached. "Alice Moore, you are under investigation for medical malpractice and fraudulently practicing without a valid degree." "No, this isn't happening." Alice shrieked, panic overtaking her poise. "Camilla, you vindictive. I didn't forge your diploma," I cut in coolly. "You did that all on your own." Our father, normally composed, turned red with rage. "This is a setup. You think you can destroy us?" The lead officer turned to him. "Mr. Moore, your financial records are under federal investigation. I suggest you get a lawyer." Our mother collapsed onto a chair, sobbing, while Alice and Dylan thrashed uselessly against the officer's grips. As they were let out, Alice whipped her head around. "You'll regret this, Camilla." I smiled faintly. "No, Alice. I've never been freer." As the doors shut behind the disgraced family, the guests erupted into murmurs. "I'm no longer the helpless girl you could throw outside like a lousy kitten." The once abandoned girl had won, not through revenge, but through truth. And with that, I turned, stepping into the night, my future wide open.
Friends, what do you think of this story? Write your opinion in the comments. Would you like more stories? Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell button so you don't miss any videos. See you tomorrow.